The steady rhythm of boarding filled the plane as passengers settled into their seats, flipping through their phones, adjusting bags, and quietly preparing for the long flight ahead. The cabin was calm, the kind of calm that exists just before something cracks. In first class, Nia Imani adjusted her carry-on beneath the seat in front of her. She moved with quiet purpose, her tailored suit crisp, her every motion precise. She had flown countless times before, yet something about this flight already felt different, though not for any reason visible on the surface. As Nia settled in, her gaze briefly crossed with a flight attendant moving swiftly through the aisle. Elara, her uniform was perfect, but her expression was stiff, her steps sharpened by a sense of control she didn't intend to surrender. The glance should have been nothing, a passing second, but it ignited something in Elara, a silent judgment that settled quickly in her stance. Her eyes narrowed, her shoulders tightened, and in that instant, Nia became someone who didn't belong. Elara approached, her tone clipped. "Excuse me, ma'am, I think you're in the wrong seat." Nia's response was calm, steady. "This is my seat." Elara didn't check the passenger list. She didn't ask for clarification. She simply folded her arms and leaned in, her words sharpened to carry weight. "This section is reserved for our premium travelers. You need to move to the back." Her voice wasn't raised yet, but it didn't have to be. The passengers nearby were already watching, their eyes sliding toward the confrontation, pretending not to listen while leaning just enough to catch every word. Nia kept her voice even. "You should confirm your list before making assumptions." Elara's expression hardened, her grip on authority tightening. "There's nothing to confirm. You need to move now." Across the aisle, a businessman paused in his reading, glancing up over the rim of his glasses. 2 rows back, a pair of women exchanged a look, one softly murmuring something about people trying to upgrade themselves. Nia didn't flinch. She didn't argue. Her silence spoke volumes, yet Elara mistook it for submission. Elara stepped closer. "If you don't move, I'll have security escort you out." The cabin's quiet was no longer ordinary. It was tense. Passengers shifted in their seats, uncertain whether to intervene or stay silent. Nia's reply was steady, not rushed. "Call whoever you need to. I'm not moving." There was no anger in her voice, no panic, just certainty. Elara's frustration deepened. She gestured toward a junior attendant hovering nearby. "Help me get her to the back." The junior attendant hesitated, glancing at Nia, then at the list she wasn't sure she should double-check. Nia's gaze never broke. Her presence wasn't loud, but it filled the space around her in a way that made it impossible to ignore. Across the aisle, the businessman finally set his reading aside, watching fully now, his attention locked on the moment unfolding. "Have you ever been treated differently because of how you look? Drop your story in the comments. We want to hear from you. And if you believe in treating everyone with respect, hit the like button now." Elara crossed her arms, still convinced she held control, unaware that she had just made a decision that would shift everything. Elara's tone sharpened. Each word weighted with authority. She refused a question. She gestured again toward the back of the plane, her voice now firm enough for nearby passengers to hear clearly. "I'm not going to ask again. You need to move now." Nia stayed seated. Her hands rested on the armrests, her shoulders relaxed. "I've asked you to check the list. That's all." Elara ignored the request. She wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in control. Passengers nearby were no longer pretending not to watch. Some shifted awkwardly in their seats. Others whispered, trading glances that flickered between curiosity and discomfort. Elara raised her chin, tightening her grip on the moment. "There's no need to check. I know you don't belong here." The accusation echoed, the edges of her words cutting deeper than her tone suggested. A man across the aisle frowned, his newspaper forgotten on his lap. 2 seats ahead, a woman adjusted her scarf and muttered, "It's always something." Nia didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She simply met Elara's stare. "You're assuming I don't belong here because of how I look." Elara's response was sharp. "I'm assuming because I know who typically sits in this section." The weight of the statement wasn't lost on anyone. It was no longer just a seat dispute. It was a declaration that some people, in Alara's eyes, were always out of place. The junior flight attendant lingered nearby, torn between following orders and the growing suspicion that something wasn't right. Her eyes darted toward the list pinned near the cockpit door, but stopped short, as if afraid to take that step. Alara noticed. "Don't even think about it," she snapped. "I've handled situations like this before." The businessman who had been watching leaned slightly forward. "Maybe it wouldn't hurt to double-check," he offered calmly. Alara shot him a look that silenced the suggestion. Turning back to Nia, she pressed harder. "You're holding everyone up. You're making a scene." Nia remained unshaken. "You've made this a scene." Passengers continued watching, their silence loud enough to fill the space between every word. Alara's next move was an accident, but she disguised it as one. As she made her way down the aisle with a tray of drinks, Nia's foot, resting slightly out into the aisle, became her target. Rather than asking Nia to move, Alara walked directly into her leg. The tray tipped, and cold water splashed across Nia's lap and the floor. Alara stepped back quickly, her voice raised. "You need to be more careful where you put your feet. Now you've caused a mess." Gasps rippled across nearby rows. Nia's fingers brushed the water from her trousers. Her calm never slipped. "You walked into me," Nia said, her tone measured. Alara wiped at the tray, her frustration thinly disguised. "If you'd been in the correct seat, this wouldn't have happened." Her words hung there, a public accusation aimed not just at Nia, but at the entire cabin perception of her. Across the aisle, the businessman spoke again, this time more firmly. "It's time you checked the list." Alara ignored him. She turned to the junior attendant. "Don't just stand there. Clean this up." The younger attendant glanced at Nia, her hesitation visible. She wanted to speak, but fear anchored her silence. Nia folded a napkin and dabbed at the water herself. "I only asked to be treated like everyone else." Alara's lips tightened. "You're holding up this flight and causing problems. Maybe if you followed the rules, this wouldn't have happened." From the row behind, a passenger whispered, "Some people just want attention." Nia heard, but her composure never cracked. Respect isn't attention-seeking. It's a right. Alara leaned closer. "Maybe you should earn it." That line turned the heads of nearly everyone nearby. The businessman set his cup down hard. "This isn't about rules. It's about the way you're treating her." Alara straightened, her frustration now visible in every motion. "I don't need you getting involved." He didn't back down. When people are mistreated in plain sight, silence helps no one. Alara's eyes flicked around the cabin, the judgment starting to shift toward her, but she pressed on. "You're the one out of place," she said, cold and final. Nia tilted her head slightly. "I don't need to explain myself to you. If you were on this flight, would you step in or would you stay silent? Be honest. Tell us in the comments." Alara crossed her arms tightly. "We'll see how far your attitude takes you." Nia's voice stayed level. "You've already gone too far." The moment was no longer just between them. The entire cabin now sat on the edge of a decision, whether to watch or whether to speak. The tension thickened, stretching across the cabin like a line drawn in silence. Alara moved quickly, carrying another tray of drinks. Her jaw was tight, her movements sharper now, each step a controlled strike. Nia adjusted her posture, shifting one foot slightly into the aisle as she settled back into her seat. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't deliberate. It was simply natural. But Alara saw it, and this time she didn't step aside. Her foot collided with Nia's leg. The tray jolted, the glasses tipping, the water splashing across Nia's lap once again. Alara gasped louder than necessary. "You need to watch where you put your legs. Now you've ruined this tray." The words weren't meant to correct. They were aimed to humiliate. Nia looked down at her soaked trousers. Her hands moved slowly, brushing away the water. She spoke with the same steady voice she had used all along. "You could have asked me to move. I would have." Alara's frustration boiled over. "It's always someone else's fault with you, isn't it?" The businessman across the aisle stood halfway, his voice steady but firm. "This isn't right. Someone needs to report this." Alara pointed at him sharply. Stay out of this. This has nothing to do with you. He didn't sit. It has everything to do with decency. Ilara turned back to Nia, her face flushed with anger. People like you don't get to lecture me on decency. Nia's response was calm, but her words struck deep. All I asked for was simple respect. You don't deserve it, Ilara snapped, stepping closer. Passengers held their breath. Without warning, Ilara's hand shot out. The sharp crack of the slap filled the air, cutting across the aisle and silencing every voice on the plane. Nia's head tilted slightly from the impact, but she didn't touch her face. She didn't cry out. She sat back in her seat, as steady as ever, her silence more powerful than any raised voice. The businessman's fists clenched. You've crossed a line. Ilara's voice shook. Stay out of this, or I'll have you removed too. He stared at her, disbelieving. For standing up to you? Go ahead. Ilara's attention snapped back to Nia, expecting her to shout, to retaliate. Nia didn't move. She slowly reached for her phone, resting on the armrest. Her fingers moved carefully across the screen as she typed a brief message. She set the phone back down without saying a word. Ilara's breathing quickened. Who are you texting? Who do you think you're calling? Nia answered without looking up. You'll see soon enough. Her voice was soft, but it cut deeper than any threat. Ilara folded her arms, as if bracing herself. You've wasted enough of everyone's time. Let's see if you're still so calm when security arrives. Nia glanced at her phone, unreadable. Her silence commanded more attention now than anything Ilara had said. Passengers exchanged glances, the mood shifting. No one spoke, but the weight of what had just happened settled heavily in every seat. What would you have done in Nia's place? Would you stay calm or fight back? Let us know in the comments. And if you're hooked, subscribe for more stories that matter. Ilara took one last look around, scanning the faces watching her. She still believed she had control, still thought she had the final say. But something had changed. The air wasn't on her side anymore. She didn't know it yet, but the decision to raise her hand had just ended her career. Ilara crossed her arms tighter, clinging to the last threads of authority she thought she still held. But something was slipping from her grip. The silence in the cabin wasn't the silence she had controlled moments earlier. It had changed. It was heavier now, no longer resting on Nia's shoulders. The eyes of the passengers no longer reflected curiosity. They reflected judgment, and not toward Nia. A quiet voice from the back spoke up. You really hit her? For sitting in her seat? Ilara ignored it, pretending she hadn't heard. But she had. Everyone had. The businessman was still standing, steady and unmoving. His voice was cold now. You've gone too far. You can't justify this. Ilara turned on him. Do you want to be removed as well? He didn't even blink. Try me? Passengers started murmuring, some louder than before. A woman in row 3 leaned into the aisle. Is anyone going to do something about this? Another voice, sharper, from the rear. She didn't do anything wrong. Why hasn't anyone verified the seat? Ilara's jaw tightened. Her hand flicked toward Grace, the junior attendant who had been frozen near the front. Stay where you are. But Grace hesitated. Her eyes shifted between Nia and the laminated passenger list secured near the galley door. Her hands twitched as if drawn to it. Ilara noticed. I told you to stay where you are. Grace swallowed, her voice low but steady. It takes 10 seconds to check. Ilara's face darkened. I said no. Grace's fingers hovered near the list now, her indecision visible. The weight of what she had witnessed hung in the air. Grace's conscience pulled her forward. I'm going to verify the seat, Grace said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Ilara's eyes burned with frustration. You're overstepping. Grace ignored her and stepped quickly to the list. Her finger traced the names carefully. In seconds, her hand froze over Nia's name. Her throat tightened as she looked back at Ilara. She's exactly where she's supposed to be. Ilara's breath caught. That can't be right. She's in the right seat, Grace repeated. She was the entire time. Passengers shifted again, their murmurs now louder, fueled by confirmation. A man in row 4 raised his voice. You dragged this woman through all of that without even checking? Ilara's posture cracked. I was following procedure. The businessman folded his arms. Which procedure is that? Ignoring the facts you don't like. Ilara stumbled through her words. She could have said something sooner. Nia finally spoke, her voice steady and deliberate. I asked you to check. I gave you that chance. Ilara's hand shook slightly as she tried to gather herself. It's too late now. Security is on the way. Nia calmly picked up her phone and glanced at the screen. She didn't bother to look at Ilara. You'll find out soon enough. Her words settled over the cabin like a quiet promise. Ilara's eyes darted between the passengers, who now openly whispered about her. The control she had clung to was dissolving. A passenger near the window called out, You owe her an apology. Right now. Ilara's lips parted, but no words came. Another voice joined in. She deserves better than this. The cabin, once divided by curiosity, now stood united against Ilara's actions. The shift was complete. Nia's gaze remained fixed out the window, distant, composed, unbothered by the storm surrounding her. Ilara's breathing quickened. Her position no longer felt solid. Her threats no longer landed. She had tipped the balance too far. Passengers began recording, their phones now openly aimed in her direction. Every second dragged her closer to an ending she hadn't foreseen. Do you think Ilara deserves forgiveness, or should she face the full consequences? Comment below. And if you believe this story should be heard by more people, share this video now. Ilara looked around one last time, trying to find an ally, but the faces staring back at her offered no support. Her power was gone. It had vanished, and she was the last to notice. Grace returned to the front of the plane, her hand still trembling as she placed the passenger list back in its holder. She said nothing more, but the damage was done. The room had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Ilara stood frozen for a moment, her eyes darting around the cabin, as if searching for an escape she no longer had. She pulled herself together quickly. The captain will have security. Remove her as soon as we land. The businessman shook his head. You don't get to decide that anymore. Ilara ignored him and stepped toward the cockpit, her steps faster now, her words sharp as she demanded the captain's attention. We have a passenger in the wrong seat, causing a disruption. I need her removed. But as she spoke, the captain's phone buzzed. His face tense as he answered, his expression hardening as the person on the other end spoke quickly and firmly. Ilara waited, shifting impatiently as the captain's focus deepened. After several long seconds, the captain turned to her, his voice steady and deliberate. You need to stop what you're doing. Right now. Ilara blinked, taken aback. I'm following protocol. She's not supposed to be here. The captain's jaw tightened. You're wrong. Before Ilara could speak again, the cockpit phone rang once more. The captain picked it up immediately, this time standing taller, his hand pressing the receiver closer to his ear. His tone changed as he listened. It became respectful, even tense. His words lowered, but every word was clear. Yes, Ms. Imani, I understand. I apologize for the unacceptable treatment. We'll handle this immediately. Ilara's breathing stuttered. Who are you talking to? The captain hung up, stepping out into the cabin with a voice that filled the space. Ms. Nia Imani is not just a passenger. She is the president and major stakeholder of the company that owns this aircraft. The sentence landed like thunder. The passengers turned in unison, their expressions flipping from curiosity to shock. Phones were lifted again. Whispers grew into audible gasps. Grace covered her mouth, the relief washing over her face as the truth finally settled. Ilara's legs nearly gave out beneath her. That's impossible. The captain continued without hesitation. I just spoke to headquarters. The owner's office contacted us directly. Ms. Imani was seated exactly where she belonged. She was treated with unforgivable disrespect. Ilara stumbled toward Nia, her voice cracking. I didn't know. I didn't realize. Please, I didn't mean to. Nia's gaze stayed level, her words calm and exact. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with respect. Ilara's hands trembled as she reached out. I'm sorry. Please, I made a mistake. I didn't mean... Nia shook her head once. Your actions have consequences. Ilara's words crumbled under panic. I can fix this. I'll apologize publicly. I can... The captain raised his hand firmly. You're done. Step aside. As the cabin doors were secured, 2 security officers entered, summoned by the airline's ground team after the immediate escalation. The captain's instructions were brief. Escort her off the plane. Ilara's protests turned desperate. Please wait. I've worked here for years. This is my life. Nia didn't speak again. She had said all she needed to. The businessman stepped closer to Nia, lowering his voice just enough for her to hear. Some people only learn when their world shakes. Nia gave him the faintest nod. As Ilara was let out, the passengers broke into scattered applause. Not loud, not mocking, but a signal that the weight had lifted from the room. Have you ever seen someone get what they truly deserve? Share your thoughts below. And if you're loving this, don't miss our next story. Subscribe now. The captain turned back to Nia. We've cleared the situation. I'm deeply sorry for everything you've endured. Nia simply said, make sure your staff are reminded who deserves respect. That's everyone. Grace stepped forward hesitantly. Ms. Imani, I'm sorry I didn't act sooner. Nia met her gaze, her tone soft but firm. You made the right choice when it counted. Grace exhaled, her relief now visible. The plane continued to its destination, but the energy on board was entirely different. The story wouldn't end there. Not for the passengers who witnessed it. Not for the airline scrambling behind the scenes. And certainly not for Ilara. The story didn't stay on the plane. It traveled faster than the flight itself. By the time Nia reached her destination, headlines had already begun circulating across major platforms. Passengers had recorded the entire exchange. The footage spread quickly, drawing sharp criticism from the public and forcing the airline's leadership into urgent damage control. The company issued a public apology, but Nia refused to accept gestures that ended at the surface. She wasn't interested in statements written to calm outrage. She wanted real change. Nia met with the airline's board of directors within days of the incident. Her message was direct. This wasn't about one flight or one employee. It was about a system that quietly allowed disrespect to go unchecked. She demanded sweeping reforms, mandatory anti-bias training, clear protocols for handling disputes, and visible consequences for discrimination at every level of the company. Her proposals included long-term changes, not just quick fixes. The airline's leadership agreed to every term, not because they suddenly understood, but because they knew ignoring her would cost them far more. What followed was not limited to one company. Competing airlines watched the backlash unfold, realizing they could be next. They began reviewing their own practices, aware that public patience for these failures was running thin. Other companies rushed to update their internal policies. Training programs were expanded. Flight crews were briefed more thoroughly on how to handle all passengers with fairness and care. The ripple effect was undeniable. News outlets labeled it the Nia Imani incident. It wasn't just another customer service story. It had become a reference point for the airline industry and a warning to companies who believed silence would protect them. Nia didn't stop there. She used her influence to establish partnerships with advocacy groups working to fight discrimination in public spaces. She invested in programs aimed at increasing the number of black professionals in aviation, not just as flight attendants, but as pilots, executives, and decision-makers. The public reaction remained intense. People weren't just angry at what happened. They wanted to see change everywhere. Families, professionals, and travelers spoke out about similar experiences that had gone unnoticed or unrecorded. Do you think companies only change when their money is on the line? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if you want to see more stories that hold people accountable, hit that like button. Nia's leadership didn't come from the incident itself. It came from what she chose to build afterward. Her story became a point of learning, not just for companies, but for everyday people who realize the importance of speaking up when things go wrong. The industry had to adjust. This wasn't optional anymore. Nia didn't just win back her dignity. She helped others claim theirs. Some weeks later, Nia prepared to board another flight. Same airline, different crew. There was a small pause as she handed over her boarding pass. The flight attendant scanned it and offered a respectful nod, her tone warm and professional. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Imani. Please let us know if you need anything." There was no tension this time, no hesitation, no second-guessing her seat or her place. As she stepped into the cabin, she noticed something else. The faces of the staff held a different kind of attentiveness, not the kind driven by fear, but by a deliberate shift in how they saw the people they served. Grace, now wearing a supervisor's badge, was among the crew. When their eyes met, Grace's brief smile said enough. No words were needed. Nia settled into her seat, the same section that had once been questioned. She glanced around the cabin, not looking for anything in particular, just absorbing the difference. The welcome wasn't just in words this time. It was in the way they moved, the way they engaged with every passenger. There was care, real care. The weight she had carried on the previous flight felt lighter now. Her phone buzzed softly in her bag, a message from her team confirming the successful rollout of the airline's new anti-bias training. Other airlines were beginning to follow. The change was in motion. Nia rested her head against the seat and allowed herself a rare, quiet smile. Not because the world was perfect, not because the work was done, but because she had made it harder for this to happen again. Her choice to stand firm had stretched beyond that single day, beyond that plane. It had sparked conversations, pushed for policies, and helped others step forward. The new atmosphere wasn't accidental. It was earned. Nia's story didn't end with confrontation. It continued with change. And this time, she was flying on her terms. In a quiet interview weeks after the incident, Nia was asked how she remained so composed through it all. Her answer was simple. Respect is a right, not a privilege. She didn't raise her voice when she said it. She didn't need to. Her story wasn't just about a seat on a plane. It wasn't even about what happened that day. It was about what happens when people refuse to accept being treated as less than they are. One voice can challenge what feels unchangeable. One moment can force an entire industry to stop, to think, and to rebuild. Nia's stand reminded others that silence has a cost, that speaking up, even when you're standing alone, can shift the ground beneath you. The changes that followed weren't accidental. They came because someone refused to let the moment pass. Would you have the courage to stand your ground like Nia? Let us know. And if this story inspired you, subscribe to Echoes of Black for more powerful stories you won't forget. Nia's story didn't just hold one person accountable. It held a system accountable. And that's how real change begins.